نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Respected Imam, brothers and sisters here at Surah Al-Mutmainna, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I will speak slowly and I hope you will be able to understand me, inshallah. Our subject is marriage and Niqah in Akhirul Zaman. What is Akhirul Zaman? It is the last age when Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, we will be tested with fitna, with tests and trials. The greatest fitna that mankind will ever experience from the time of Adam alayhi salam to the last day. You will know that you are in Akhirul Zaman when, for example, women are dressed and yet naked. You know that you are in Akhirul Zaman when women are dressed like men, and when men are dressed like women. You know that you are in Akhirul Zaman when there is zina, and most of the children are awladu zina. You know that that is Akhirul Zaman. You know that you are in Akhirul Zaman when riba is everywhere. And you cannot find one person in all of mankind, not one, who will not be consuming riba. That is Akhirul Zaman. And so tonight we look at one subject, namely marriage in Akhirul Zaman. And we begin with Isra and Mi'raj. Nabi Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam is taken up with Buraq into the Samawat, not Jannah, into the Samawat. And there he is greeted by the Malaika, the angels, by the Anbiya alayhim salam, the prophets. And they all smile and greet him. But one angel does not smile. Who is he? Jibreel alayhi salam said, that is Malik, the angel of Jahannam. Even for you he did not smile. Jahannam is not a nice place. So Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam asked, can you ask him to allow me to look into Jahannam? And Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam looks into Jahannam and he sees a number of things which are located in Akhirul Zaman. He sees men with big bellies, hot bellies, and inside of their bellies there are snakes. Terrible thing to see. The bellies are transparent, so you can see. Who are these men? Jibreel alayhi salam replies and says, these are the men who consumed riba. And so riba is a major sign of Akhirul Zaman. Whether riba is big or small, said the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, the result will be the same. It just takes some more time. The result will be poverty and destitution. No money when there is riba. And then he saw some men sitting at a table, and there are 2 plates of food in front of them. One plate is nice, fresh nasi biryani, smelling nice, good meat, fresh meat. The other one is rotten meat, smelling terrible, and with maggots walking on it, fit for the garbage bin. And the men were eating from the rotten meat and not eating from the good meat. Who are these men? Asked the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Jibreel alayhi salam said, these are the men who left the wives that Allah had made halal for them, or the women that Allah had made halal for them, nisa, and they went to other women, which was haram. And this is their punishment in Jahannam. But tonight we want to mention one more thing, and that is that, and this is very puzzling, and for me, for most of my life, I could not understand it until I came to ilmu Akhirul Zaman. Only then, by Allah's kindness, I was able to understand ilmu Akhirul Zaman. He said that I found in Jahannam that most of those who were in Jahannam were women. Did you hear that? You heard that? Yes. Most of those in Jahannam were women. If you use the wrong way, the wrong methodology, then you will conclude that all through human history, most of the women will go to Jahannam. That's wrong. This is not for all of history. This is for Akhirul Zaman. Everything in Isra and Miraj is for Akhirul Zaman. So that in Akhirul Zaman, something is going to happen to the world of women, in consequence of which most women will be so misguided that they will enter into Jahannam. And that is our topic for tonight. marriage and Akhirul Zaman. Why would most women in Akhirul Zaman end up in Jahannam? Our sisters who are present would be even more interested than the brothers to learn the answer so that they can themselves protect themselves from Jahannam. The answer lies in the major actor of Akhirul Zaman. He is Al-Masih al-Dajjal. He wants to rule the world. And when he does so, he will then declare, I am Al-Masih. But he would not be Al-Masih. Al-Masih, or the Messiah, is Nabi Isa alayhi salam. This man wants to impersonate the true Messiah and take the Jews for a ride. Among the things that he does is to mislead the Jews into believing that he is Al-Masih, or the Messiah. But in addition to that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has programmed Dajjal to test all of mankind. And the Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, the last people to come out to Dajjal would be women. And the man would have to return to his home and tie down. I'm going to use a difficult English word now, so maybe Jamal, you could translate it. He would coercively restrain. That's difficult English, eh? Tie down, to tie. Coercively restrain. How do you say that in Bahasa? Come on, help me. Oh, you don't speak Bahasa? Good English. To coercively restrain. Tie down. Alright, when you learn Bahasa, let me know. A man would have to return to his home and tie down his wife, sister, daughter, to protect them from being seduced by Dajjal, indicating that in Akhirul Zaman, Dajjal is going to attack women, and the attack is going to be so sophisticated that he will brainwash them to such an extent that you can talk and talk and talk. They will not listen to you. It's like hitting your head on a brick wall. They will not listen to you. That's the brainwashing of women. And that brainwashing is going to lead women towards the feminist revolution, in which women will dress like men. Why? Why would a woman dress with a jacket and a tie and trousers? Why? Answer: because Dajjal wants her to assume the functional role of men in society. In order for her to become a career woman, a working woman, and Allah has given to her the intelligence. Oh yes, she has it. Your mother was a woman. Oh yes. And you know how much intelligence your mother had. So women are not inferior intellectually. Take that rubbish and throw it away. Your mother is a woman. Dajjal is going to seduce women now into seeking to assume the functional role of men in society, which is the public life. The public life. But in order for her to do so, she will have to compromise in her role as a wife and a mother. Number one, you can't be a working woman and still do what your grandmother did in Terengganu. She had 12 children. Huh? Didn't your grandmother in Terengganu have 12 children? Not today. The working woman cannot manage 12 children. Double A. So, instead of Allah doing the right thing, that's what Allah says in the Quran. How many children would you have? He does the right thing. وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. When you go to your wife, seek for what Allah has written for you. But now, in the age of Dajjal, there is something called responsible parenting, planned parenthood. So you must do the right thing yourself. You and your husband will decide how many children you will have and when you're going to have them. Space them out, because I'm a working woman. That is shirk. Notice how I pronounced the word. Did you notice? I said shirk. That is the only correct pronunciation. If you pronounce it differently, you're disrespecting the Quran. Remember that. Dajjal, in consequence, puts her out in the office to work. And so she becomes a part-time wife and a part-time mother. And there are men all around her in the office, and she's a beautiful woman. And you know these things happen. And so the feminist revolution leads to many divorces, marriages breaking up. It's happening in Malaysia as well. But not only does Dajjal brainwash her into assuming the functional role of women in society. Don't come to me with the nonsense that Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha was a businesswoman. You don't have to tell me that. I know it. We're not talking about that. Dajjal also brings with the feminist revolution a sexual revolution, because she is dressed and yet naked. And when women are dressed and yet naked, it provokes men, particularly young men, are provoked. And instead of love, you now have something called lust. And that also leads to divorces. So in the age of Dajjal, in Akhirul Zaman, one of the signs that you will see is marriages breaking up. She had a first husband, it broke up. And then she had a second husband, it broke up. And then she said, not me again. Not me again. And so in Akhirul Zaman, you'll find that as marriages break up, listen carefully, as marriages break up one after the other, a large number of women are going to be single. And they're not going to go back into marriage. No. We've been burnt twice already. We're not going to go back into marriage unless and until we find a man who is indeed a prince of all men. Because we don't want to live with garbage. Well then, what is the price that mankind will pay when you have so many women who are single, who would like to be married but cannot get husbands? This is a very interesting start to our lecture. I now want to turn to Surah An-Nisa of the Quran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the first and only time in the Quran, speaks about plural marriages. The Battle of Badr has taken place, and a number of our men have been killed. The Battle of Uhud has taken place, and a number of our men have been killed. And there are large numbers of orphans, yatim, orphans. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down revelation. And He says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. If you fear that you as a community will not be able to fulfill your obligations to these orphans, Allah now advises, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُمْ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. This is what you must do. Marry of the Nisa. Nisa means woman. Which woman is he talking about? فَانْكِحُوا مِنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى مَا طَابَ لَكُمْ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَعَ. Marry 2, 3, or 4 of the Nisa. Answer. Allah is speaking about the orphan girls, the yatim. And He's saying that those orphan girls who have reached the age of Niqah, they are now baligha. Now they are women. Once she is baligha, she has reached the age of puberty. She now has the monthly cycle. She can become a mother. She is now referred to as Nisa. So Allah says, amongst the orphan girls, those who have reached the age of Niqah, meaning they are now Nisa, these women, marry them. 2, 3, 4, but that's the limit. Prior to this Sharia, there was no limit. A man could have as many wives as he wanted. But now this Sharia comes down, and it is the last. No more after this. And Allah imposes a limit of 4 wives. So now Imran Hosein wants to stop the lecture. And he wants to ask this audience in Masjid in Surau al-Mutmainnah, in an area called Pandan in Kuala Lumpur. If Allah has permitted men to marry up to 4 wives, and if it is He who creates, yuhyi wa yumit, He creates. No child is born unless Allah creates. So Allah will create the number of people in the world, not the United Nations organization. No. And Allah will determine how many men and how many women. Allah will do that. Not even, what's his name now? Barack Hussein Obama. He can't determine. It is Allah who determines how many men and how many women. And I ask of you tonight, if Allah has ordained that men can marry up to 4 wives, would He create an equal number of men and women? No. No. That would be defective planning. I think I've taken you by surprise now, haven't I? It's good, you know, to study the Quran. It helps you to wash away the brainwashing that comes from newspapers and radio and television. The implication of this verse of the Quran is that Allah must create more women than men. Must. If men are to have up to 4 wives, there must be a larger number of women than men. Along comes Dajjal, and he launches his attack in the feminist revolution by arguing that the norm that is morally acceptable, that is respectable, is that one man should have 1 wife, monogamy. And that if a man has more than 1 wife, then he is morally inferior. The one who has 1 wife is a better man. The one who has 2 or 3 or 4, something wrong with him. And guess what? I have to restrain myself now. Otherwise my wife is going to be very angry at me afterwards. She said, why do you get so angry? Why do you raise your voice? Because I get so frustrated. That's why. I'm only a human being. I don't have a heart made out of wood. Yeah. He brainwashes mankind. Car number WNT 8380. You better go and switch off your lights, otherwise your battery is gone. And WNT 8380, yours. Car lights are on. The whole world is going to hear that now. In France they'll hear about it. So he brainwashes mankind into believing that monogamy, one man, one wife, is the moral norm. And then he makes it the legal norm. The law now in many countries of the world prohibits you from having more than one wife. Prohibits you. You can have as many monikers as you want. But you cannot have a second wife. Thank Allah for Malaysia, because you still have the sultans. And the sultans have many wives. So Malaysians still can have many wives, so long as you have your sultans. Thank Allah for Malaysia. The law in this country permits you to have up to 4 wives. Alhamdulillah for us. But for the rest of the world, and I don't know how many Malaysian men have 4 wives, 3 wives, or 2 wives. Interesting to find out afterwards. My question is, if Allah has created more women than men, because men are allowed to marry up to 4 wives, and now you come with your new law prohibiting plural marriages, and most men in the world now have only 1 wife. Can you not understand the implication of your stupidity, your absolute foolishness of abandoning the Quran and abandoning Islam? Like donkeys, we have followed Dajjal with the intellectual acumen of donkeys. We followed Dajjal. The good men have only 1 wife. So the implication would be that there would be a large number of women who would not be able to get husbands, because Allah created more women than men. Is this not an abnormal situation? This is not what Allah intended. But this is what modern Western civilization has given us today. We don't have to wait. We do not have to wait until a tomorrow to come, when there will be big wars and so on. Take that analysis, please, and take it outside. I don't want to hear it. I'm giving you a new analysis. And I'm saying to you that Allah must have created many more women than men. And I don't believe in their statistics. Statistics, they tell lies. The biggest lie of all was 9/11. These people have PhDs in telling lies. So when one man has only 1 wife, the implication would be that there would be a large number of women who cannot find husbands in Akhirul Zaman. Add now to that the number of women who are divorced once, divorced twice, who are widows, who have children, and who cannot get husbands because he says, I don't want a woman with children. I just heard it myself. I just heard it myself from somebody who asked me to help him to get a wife. And he said to me, I don't want a woman with children. But your Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he married Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and she had children. My mother was a widow. At age 18, she was a widow with a baby girl. And 5 years later, my father went to see her. And they dressed her up and they put her in a room to sit. And he was allowed to take a look in the room and see her. And he agreed to marry her. And these were his words, my father. He said, if Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam could marry a woman with children, so can I. So can I. But now the prevailing sentiment is, since I can only have one wife, I better make sure she's nice and young and pretty and stuff. I don't want any divorced woman, I don't want any widow, and I don't want any woman with children either. So a large number of women in Akhirul Zaman, in consequence of the planning of Dajjal, already today cannot find husbands. What do we do? What do we do? Allah goes on in the Quran. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Marry the orphan girls who have reached the age, baligha. Marry them 2, 3 or 4. But when you marry in Islam, this is the religion of justice. So your wives must be treated equally. You can't buy a Mercedes Benz for the first one and a Kanchil for the next one. Huh? How would she feel? She driving the Kanchil and that one driving the Mercedes? That's not fair. So if you bought a Mercedes for the first one and then you want to take a second one, what are you going to do now? Are you going to tell the first one, I'll have to sell the Mercedes and buy a Kanchil for you? Huh? Would she have to suffer a decline in her standard of living because you want to take a second, a third, a fourth wife? No. No. You can only take a second, a third, and a fourth wife if your first wife does not have to suffer. So you have to maintain equality. But to do that, you must have ringgits. Huh? Sorry, dinar and dirham. But in Akhirul Zaman, mankind is heading towards poverty and destitution. We're growing poorer and poorer. When I started coming to Malaysia 22 years ago, and I began lecturing on dinar and dirham, people used to look at me as though I'd come from Mars or Venus or somewhere. But at that time you could buy 1 ounce of gold with very few dirhams, ringgits. The ringgit was worth more in terms of buying gold. And if you look at the graph these last 20 years, you will see that the value of your ringgit is going down and down and down and down and down. Just try to buy a dinar and you will see. And so although you are not aware of it, you're becoming poorer and poorer and poorer. And when the big war comes, and it's around the corner, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam described it as the Malhama. And the Christians call it Armageddon. When the Malhama comes, and I want to share with you tonight my view that the Malhama has already started. It has started by proxy, P-R-O-X-Y. How do you say proxy in Bahasa? Huh? Pagi PH. Proxy. Wakil. The Malhama has already started by proxy in Ukraine. And it is going to escalate until eventually it will culminate with nuclear war. The Zionists want that nuclear war. And Russia is not backing down, not under Putin. So you can close your eyes and anticipate that there is a nuclear war coming, which is the Malhama that Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam prophesied, and that is going to be the end of all paper money. All paper money will be gone. There will be no ringgits after that, no US dollars after that, no French franc, no euro. They don't need that anymore. There will be one universal currency. And it will be invisible. You can't see it. It will be intangible, you can't touch it. You can't take your money and put it underneath your pillow. No. Because money will now be only electronic money. And they can remain only in banks. And your enemy, your worst enemy, controls the banking system. وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَشَدَّ النَّاسِ عَدَاوَةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ الْيَهُودُ وَالَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا, says Allah in the Quran. That your worst enemies of all in Akhirul Zaman will be the Jews. Not all Jews, no, not all. He's speaking about the Zionist Jews. That collapse of money is coming, and universal poverty is coming. That's the only way that Israel can rule the world, or what remains of the world after the Malhama. So my question is, how, even at this time, it is so difficult to maintain two wives equally? How are you going to do it tomorrow? And that tomorrow is close by, when paper money will be gone. No more ringgits. The answer is very few men tomorrow will be able to marry 4 women and treat them equally. The second, the third, and the fourth equally with the first. So what are we going to do? With the huge surplus of women, what are we going to do? Already your wife says, go ask her when you go home, my husband cannot take another wife. No, not possible. I prefer a divorce than to allow you to have another wife. Well, sister, that is one of the reasons why you're heading for Jahannam. Yes, sister, that is one of the reasons why you are heading for Jahannam. Most women today think like that. I cannot allow and I will not tolerate my husband having more than one wife, make yourself ready for Jahannam. This is a scholar of Islam speaking to you tonight, based on guidance in the Quran and the hadith of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah goes on in the Quran, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. If you fear that you will not be able to deal justly with your four wives, one of the reasons being you don't have the means, you're poor. He then says, فَوَاحِدًا, then marry only one. فَوَاحِدًا, marry only one. But it does not stop there. The verse goes on to say, أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Marry only one, but in addition to that, from amongst the orphan girls who have reached the age of puberty, from amongst them, you can have them now as Malk al-Yamin. Malk al-Yamin. Allah is not talking about slaves. I hope you're listening to me in France and Britain and the United States tonight. Allah is not talking about slaves. He's not talking about prisoners of war. No. He's talking about the orphan girls. That is the context of the verse. And so it is possible for a woman to become Malk al-Yamin through a means other than slavery and other than prisoners of war. So Allah has provided two categories of women. Two categories of women with whom a man can have intimate relations. Let us leave Surah An-Nisa and let us go to Surah Al-Mu'minun, Surah number 23. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Success. Success is there for those who have faith in Allah. Success. Who are they? They are those who perform their salat humbly, khushu'. They are those who pay the zakat, even charity. They are those who stay away from idle talk, vain talk, gossiping, spreading lies and spreading rumors and so on. They are those who guard their private parts, except with their wives and with their Malk al-Yamin. For with these there is no blame. The Quran is as plain as daylight. Where is the confusion? There are those who guard their private parts, except with their wives and with their Malk al-Yamin. For with these there is no blame. They are blameless. In other words, men have permission to have intimacy with two kinds of women, wives and Malk al-Yamin. The difference between the wife and the Malk al-Yamin is that, number one, wives have rights of inheritance. Yes, Malk al-Yamin have no rights of inheritance. A man can leave a gift for his Malk al-Yamin, but she doesn't have the rights that a wife has. Number two, the social status of a wife is higher. But that does not mean that the milk of Yamin has no status, not at all. But number three, and most important of all, a man does not have an obligation to maintain milk and Yamin equal to a wife. So Allah has provided an opportunity, a means whereby these women can be absorbed, can have someone to maintain them, can have someone to offer them some satisfaction for their biological needs. But he does not have to maintain them equally with his wife. No. He can maintain them to the extent that he has the capacity to do so. This is one of the most important differences between the two. If a baby is born to Malk al-Yamin, that child has the same rights, no difference, the children of the wife. The mother of that baby will now be known as Walad. Walad. So that Allah has provided a means whereby the surplus woman can be absorbed. So what does Dajjal do? He takes this verse of the Quran, it's not one verse, about a dozen in the Quran, about Malk al-Yamin, and puts it into something called cold storage. That the only way a woman can be Malk al-Yamin is if she's a slave. Does the Quran say so? Before you open your mouth? And I have to restrain myself now not to become angry at the irresponsible statements being made. Before you open your mouth to speak, why don't you study the Quran? Does the Quran refer to Malk al-Yamin as slaves? No. Allah refers to them as fatayat, your young men, your young women. And the Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, do not describe them as slaves. He stopped you from doing that. But the modern world says that the only way she can become Malk al-Yamin is if she is a slave. And that slavery is only when there are prisoners of war. That is false. That is false. A woman can become Malk al-Yamin through other means as well, as in this verse of the orphans. The problem now lies with Akhirul Zaman. How do we resolve the problem of an increasingly large number of women? Every year it becomes bigger and bigger because Allah is creating more women than men. And we have mentioned in previous lectures that the new cell phones that we have, you've seen a cell phone, haven't you? And wireless internet, the radiation, there's medical evidence, the radiation, and the genetically modified food that we eat is damaging male sperm production. In consequence of which men who are exposed to this radiation cannot give to their wives baby boys anymore, only baby girls. I went to deliver a lecture at, was it Selcom, here in Malaysia, and after the lecture one of the officers got up and said, Sheikh, we already have the evidence that our workers who work to put up the cellular towers, those workers report none of them have baby boys, none. The evidence is already there. So a combination of a number of factors now is creating a situation where large numbers of women cannot find husbands, cannot find men to maintain them. Is this the reason why the Prophet said Let me quote one more hadith before I end. He said about Akhirul Zaman that one man would have to maintain 50 women. My understanding now, after such a long study of ilmu Akhirul Zaman, is that what this hadith is saying is that the number of men who will be available to maintain these women will be very few. Because most men are going to be brainwashed, I will have only one wife. Most men are going to be brainwashed, there is no such thing as Malk al-Yamin. That's gone, that's in the cold storage. And so, the number of men who will be available to these women will be so few who would be prepared to marry 2, 3 or 4, who would be prepared to accept them as Malk al-Yamin, would be so few in the world that the ratio will be 1 to 50. This is my understanding of the hadith of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. If you have a better one, please share it with me. And so now we come to a conclusion about marriage in Akhirul Zaman. That we men will have to answer to Allah on Judgment Day. Why? Every woman has a right to her husband. Every woman has a right to a husband. Every man does not have a right to a wife. No. Every man has a duty to marry. And every woman has a right to a husband. And so if the men do not marry them, these large numbers of women out there who do not have husbands and who are not prepared to get married to a garbage bin, you will have to answer to Allah on Judgment Day. Prepare yourself for that day, because you are not following the guidance of the Quran. In addition to plural marriages, which is going to be difficult except for those who are wealthy enough. In addition to plural marriages, Allah has provided a second means whereby we can resolve the problem, and that is Malk al-Yamin. How can a woman become Malk al-Yamin in Akhirul Zaman? How? The answer is she is a free woman. She has freedom. If she chooses to offer herself freely, with no compulsion and no exchange of money, offer herself as Malk al-Yamin to a man of her choice, not a garbage bin. And if he accepts the offer, then take the United Nations and its laws and throw it away. This is Allah's law. And we are not afraid to stand up for Allah's law. Regardless of the price we'll have to pay, because we are men with backbones. We'll defy Dajjal and defy his brainwashed, godless world. If she offers herself as Malk al-Yamin, and we accept that offer, and it is put down in writing and signed with witnesses, then she becomes your Malk al-Yamin, and you now have an obligation to maintain her, but not the level equal to your wife. But the Quran also speaks about something else. The Quran, remember, this is the Quran talking. The Quran says if she wants her freedom, then sign a contract with her. Sign a contract with her. Put it in writing, says Allah in the Quran. So at the same time that she makes the contract of Malk al-Yamin, we suggest that you make a second contract as well, according to the verse of the Quran. And that second contract would make mention of the grounds on this basis of which she can get her freedom. For example, she could say, well, I offer to pay 1 dirham. Any day that I want my freedom, and if I give you the 1 dirham, you have to release me. Okay? Or she can say, well, I offer to do this or do that or whatever it is. And she now is assured that any time she wants to get out of the contract of Malk al-Yamin, she can get out of the contract based upon a written agreement. This seems to me to be one of the roads in which we can resolve the problem of Akhirul Zaman. Those men who have the means to marry and do not marry, and as a consequence our sisters out there continue to suffer. You'll have to answer to Allah on Judgment Day for that. One last comment, however. It is not proper for any man to approach a woman who is a free woman to invite her to become his Malk al-Yamin. That is not proper at all. This is a free woman. My opinion, and when I give my opinion, you know the rule. You must only accept my opinion if you are convinced that it is correct. My opinion, it is the right of a woman and a woman alone. Only she can offer herself if she wants to as Malk al-Yamin. And then he has the right if he wants to accept or to reject. But he must not approach her to ask her to become his Malk al-Yamin. If she becomes his Malk al-Yamin, as the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, give them to eat the food that you eat. Give them to wear the clothes that you wear. Respect their humanity. They have rights before Allah. And any man who is kind to his wife and kind to his Malk al-Yamin, and that woman were to raise her hands and make dua to Allah for her husband, or for the man who is taking care of her, there are blessings for our men in Akhirul Zaman. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow us the capacity to connect the dots of Akhirul Zaman, to be able to understand the Dajjal's plan in order to be able to respond to the Dajjal's plan. Prophet ﷺ warned where this plan is leading. With so many women out there, can't find husbands, dressed and yet naked. He said, people will have sexual intercourse in public like donkeys. That's coming. We have to protect ourselves by building a society, a community of Muslims living in accordance with the Sharia, and show to that godless Western world that we can have a morally sound and healthy society while yours is falling apart. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.